The Galactic Council chamber was a magnificent sight to behold. Crystalline spires rose from the floor to the distant ceiling, bathed in the multicolored light of 1,000 suns streaming through transparent dome panels. Representatives from over 300 sentient species sat in tiered seating arranged in a perfect circle, their varied anatomies accommodated by custom-designed furniture. The air was filled with a pleasant scent designed to be inoffensive to all known respiratory systems. It was, in short, the pinnacle of interstellar cooperation and harmony, which made the current atmosphere of horror and revulsion all the more striking. "Order. I will have order," bellowed High Councilor Vrelnak, his 7 appendages waving frantically as he attempted to calm the chamber. His normally pale blue skin had darkened to a deep navy in distress. "We must approach this matter with the calm deliberation that befits this august body." The uproar continued for several more minutes before gradually subsiding to a low murmur of chittering, whistling and various other species-specific expressions of discomfort. "That's better," Vrelnak said, his voice amplified through the chamber's acoustic enhancement field. "Now, as I was saying, we have uncovered evidence of a most disturbing nature regarding our newest members, the species known as humans. A holographic display activated in the center of the chamber, showing images of Earth and its inhabitants. Intelligence gathered by our cultural research teams indicates that humans have, since their primitive tribal days, engaged in the systematic extermination of numerous species that share their homeworld." Vrelnak's voice dropped to a horrified whisper. "They call this practice pest control." The chamber erupted again. Meanwhile, in a small antechamber adjacent to the council floor, Ambassador Jack Murphy of Earth was having the worst day of his diplomatic career, a career that had, until approximately 20 minutes ago, been going spectacularly well. "I'm sorry, they want me to what?" Jack asked, straightening his tie for the 3rd time in as many minutes. The green-skinned protocol officer standing before him, who had introduced himself simply as Grix, blinked all 4 of his eyes in sequence. "The High Council requests your immediate presence to answer charges of xenocide committed by your species." "Xenocide?" Jack's voice cracked. "But we just joined the Galactic Union 3 months ago. We haven't even established permanent embassies on most worlds yet." Grix consulted his datapad. "The charges relate to multiple extinction events perpetrated on your homeworld against, let me see, mosquitoes, cockroaches, termites, and something called bed bugs." Jack Murphy stared blankly at the protocol officer, utterly bewildered. This had to be some kind of translation error. It just had to be. Jack's entrance into the council chamber was met with a silence so profound he could hear the soft whirring of the environmental systems. Thousands of alien eyes and various non-ocular sensory organs tracked his movement as he walked to the central podium reserved for those addressing the council. High Councilor Vrelnak's voice boomed across the chamber. "Ambassador Murphy, you stand before this council representing a species that has, by your own historical records, engaged in deliberate campaigns to drive countless sentient species to extinction. I think there's been some misunderstanding," Jack began cautiously. "Misunderstanding?" Vrelnak's skin rippled with chromatic patterns indicating extreme skepticism. "Council liaison, please present the evidence." A tall, willowy alien with bioluminescent patterns flowing across its translucent skin glided forward. This was Officer Quixel, whom Jack recognized from previous diplomatic functions. Quixel had always been polite but distant. Now, the alien's glow patterns were pulsing in what Jack's cultural training identified as patterns of disgust and moral outrage. "Distinguished council members," Quixel began, "our cultural research teams have compiled extensive evidence from human information networks. I warn you, what follows is disturbing." The central holographic display activated, showing a commercial for bug spray. A human woman screamed at the sight of a cockroach, then sprayed it with a canister. The narrator cheerfully described killing on contact while the insect writhed and died. The display changed to show another advertisement, this one for rat poison, kills the entire colony, proclaimed the enthusiastic narrator. Similar commercials followed, each more horrifying to the alien audience than the last. Termite fumigation, mosquito foggers, ant traps. "Ant traps," Furthermore, QXL continued, the luminescent patterns on their skin now pulsing rapidly. Humans create specialized death chambers for these beings, which they euphemistically call extermination companies or pest control services. They employ professionals whose sole occupation is the systematic elimination of entire species. Jack's mouth hung open. His mind raced to catch up with what was happening. Ambassador Murphy, Vrelnak intoned gravely, how do you respond to these charges? These aren't sentient species, Jack finally managed. They're pests. The translation of the word pests caused an immediate uproar. Several delegates required medical attention as their equivalents of blood pressure spiked dangerously. Silence. Vrelnak thundered, all 7 appendages raised. When order was restored, he fixed Jack with a penetrating stare. Perhaps you would care to explain what you mean by this term pests, which your translator renders in our language as lesser beings unworthy of life. It was at this moment that Jack Murphy realized just how deeply in trouble humanity might be. QXL approached him, voice lowered to avoid being heard by the council at large. You humans truly are the monsters I suspected. I studied your species extensively before your admission to the Union. I know about your pest control, your hunting for sport, your animal testing. I will ensure justice for the countless victims of human cruelty. Jack swallowed hard. This was going to be complicated. High Councilor, esteemed representatives, Jack began, trying to keep his voice steady. There appears to be a profound cultural misunderstanding. On Earth, the term pest refers to organisms that damage human health, food supplies, or structures. They are not sentient beings by any definition. Vrelnak's appendages twitched. You claim the right to exterminate species based on their inconvenience to you. Not exactly, Jack said, feeling sweat bead on his forehead. Let me try to explain. Take cockroaches, for instance. They're insects about this big. He held his thumb and forefinger about an inch apart that invade our homes, contaminate our food, and can spread disease. So you commit genocide because these beings enter your artificial structures? Asked a jellyfish-like council member floating in a gravity-nullifying field. No, that's not Jack's side. Look, just yesterday I found a cockroach in my temporary quarters here on the station. You brought your extermination practices to this station. Vrelnak bellowed, his skin now pulsating between deep purple and black. No, I simply trapped it in a cup and released it into the recycling chute, Jack explained hastily, noting the part where he'd initially tried to squash it with his shoe before remembering where he was. A new voice cut through the tension. If I may, High Councilor. Jack turned to see Commander Talia Rodriguez striding toward the podium. As Earth's military attaché to the Galactic Union, her presence at diplomatic functions was standard, but her decision to speak was unexpected and, given her usual bluntness, potentially disastrous. Commander Rodriguez, this is highly irregular, Vrelnak said. So is accusing humanity of xenocide because we don't want disease-carrying vermin in our homes, Talia replied sharply. She reached the podium and stood beside Jack. Where I grew up in New Mexico, we had scorpions, nasty little things that would hide in your shoes and sting you if you weren't careful. My mother would check our rooms every night with a black light because scorpions glow under UV. QXL gasped. You hunted them with radiation weapons? What? No, it was just a light, Talia said, exasperated. The point is, when she found one, she'd kill it because it could hurt her children. That's not xenocide, it's protection. You killed them for existing in their natural habitat, which you invaded, QXL countered. Their natural habitat isn't my kid's bedroom, Talia shot back. Jack put a restraining hand on Talia's arm. What Commander Rodriguez is trying to explain is that Earth has millions of species, and humans coexist peacefully with the vast majority. Only a small percentage are considered pests, and those are controlled only when they pose a direct threat. Controlled? An octopus-like delegate waved tentacles in agitation. Your own evidence shows mass extermination campaigns. Jack realized he was losing ground. Perhaps we need an expert to explain Earth's ecosystem better than I can. High Councilor, may I call Dr. Eldon Morris, our expedition xenobiologist? Vrelnak conferred briefly with other council members. Granted. But be warned, Ambassador, if this expert merely justifies extermination, it will reflect poorly on your defense. As they waited for Dr. Morris to arrive, Talia leaned over to Jack. This is ridiculous. Are we really on trial for killing bugs? Apparently, Jack whispered back. And please try not to use phrases like killing bugs while we're here. Dr. Eldon Morris was not what most of the council expected. Rather than the stern, cold-eyed scientist they anticipated, Dr. Morris was a rumpled, middle-aged man with wild grey hair and a perpetually bemused expression. He wore a wrinkled lab coat covered in mysterious stains, and he carried what appeared to be a terrarium. Dr. Morris, thank you for joining us, Jack said, relieved to see a friendly face. Fascinating situation you've got here. Ambassador, Morris replied with inappropriate cheerfulness. Absolutely fascinating. A classic case of divergent evolutionary paradigms creating irreconcilable ethical frameworks. Vrelnak's appendages twitched impatiently. Dr. Morris, you have been called to explain Earth's biological systems and humanity's relationship with other species. Yes, of course, Morris said, placing the terrarium on a small table near the podium. You see, Earth is what we call a biodiversity hotspot. Our planet hosts approximately 8.7 million species that we know of. Probably millions more we haven't catalogued yet. Murmurs swept through the council chamber. 8 million? One delegate gasped. Most harmonized worlds maintain between 500 and 2,000 species in their ecosystems. Really? Morris looked genuinely surprised. How do you manage nutrient cycling with so few decomposers? What about pollination systems? Soil microbiota? We engineer what is needed, replied a crystalline being from the upper tiers. Unnecessary biological diversity leads to competition and suffering. Fascinating approach, Morris muttered, making notes on a small device. But on Earth, our ecosystem evolved naturally over billions of years, creating complex interdependencies. Some species, however, have adapted to exploit human environments in ways that threaten our health and safety. He gestured toward the terrarium. For example, this is Aedes aegypti, the yellow fever mosquito. Female mosquitoes require blood meals to reproduce, and in the process they transmit diseases that kill millions of humans annually. So you commit genocide because these beings feed on you? Asked a gaseous entity contained within a transparent sphere. It's not genocide, Morris explained patiently. These insects aren't sentient by any measurable standard. They operate on simple stimulus response mechanisms, and despite centuries of control efforts, mosquitoes remain one of the most abundant insects on Earth. Our efforts merely keep their populations in check in human habitation zones. QXL glided forward, luminescence pulsing angrily. The capacity for suffering doesn't depend on your arbitrary definitions of sentience, Doctor. These beings have evolved over millions of years, same as you. They have as much right to exist as humans do. Even when they transmit diseases that kill millions of children every year, Jack interjected. All life is sacred, QXL declared. All council member species have evolved beyond the barbaric notion that one species has the right to control another. Dr. Morris raised an eyebrow. Interesting. So how do council species manage disease vectors on their worlds? An uncomfortable silence fell over the chamber. Well, Vrelnak said finally, most council worlds don't have disease vectors as you call them. Early in our technological development, we identified problematic organisms and adjusted our ecosystems accordingly. Jack leaned forward. Adjusted how, exactly? A tall, spindly delegate with compound eyes spoke up. My species removed all organisms that caused disease or competed with our food sources approximately 12,000 years ago. We maintain precisely 1,422 species on our homeworld, each with a specific ecological function. Similar statements came from around the chamber. One species had reduced their world to just 500 carefully managed organisms. Another maintained separate biospheres for different classes of organisms, preventing any cross-species competition. You engineered your entire planets? Dr. Morris asked, his scientific curiosity overriding diplomatic caution. You're saying you committed actual extinction events, removing entire species permanently from existence? It was for the greater harmony. Vrelnak explained defensively, better to compassionately remove problematic species entirely than to engage in endless cycles of control and suffering. Jack and Talia exchanged glances. Jack stepped forward. Let me get this straight. You're condemning humans for controlling pest populations, while most of you actually drove species to complete extinction on your homeworlds. That was different, Couexil insisted, though their luminescence had dimmed considerably. It was done once, cleanly, to establish permanent harmony. Ecological harmony through extinction, Morris mused, fascinating approach. Completely impossible on Earth, of course. Our ecosystem is far too complex and interdependent. Remove one species, and you might trigger cascading failures affecting thousands of others. To demonstrate, Morris opened the terrarium and carefully removed something. Council members leaned forward, curious despite themselves. This, Morris said, holding up a small glass vial, contains several species of soil bacteria, microscopic organisms. On average, a gram of Earth soil contains between 100 million and 1 billion bacterial cells, representing thousands of species. They break down organic matter, cycle nutrients, support plant growth, and maintain soil structure. The council members stared at the unremarkable vial of dirt. Are you saying, Vrelnak asked slowly, that your world has thousands of species too small to see that you depend upon? Millions. Actually, Morris corrected cheerfully. The human body itself hosts approximately 100 trillion microorganisms representing thousands of species. They aid digestion, provide essential nutrients, and help train our immune systems. A wave of something between disgust and fascination swept through the chamber. You carry other species inside your bodies? A gelatinous delegate burbled. We couldn't survive without them, Morris confirmed. Couexil had drifted closer during this exchange, their luminescent patterns shifting from outrage to something more like confusion. But if your world is so chaotic, with millions of competing species, how do you maintain any balance at all? Jack saw an opening. That's just it, Officer Couexil. Earth's balance isn't something humans created, it's something we're part of. We don't control our ecosystem, we're trying to live within it while protecting ourselves from its dangers. Which sometimes, Talia added, means killing the cockroach that's crawling toward the baby's crib. Couexil's patterns pulsed slowly as they processed this. Your world sounds terrifying. Jack smiled for the first time since entering the chamber. It can be. But it's also beautiful in its complexity. Would you like to see? Before anyone could object, Dr. Morris had produced a small projector that displayed holographic images of Earth's rainforests, coral reefs, savannas, and mountains, each teeming with thousands of visible species living in dynamic equilibrium. Couexil's luminescence brightened with what Jack recognized as wonder. 3 hours later, after extensive debate and several minor diplomatic incidents, including the moment when Dr. Morris accidentally released a fruit fly from his terrarium, causing a panic that required a 15-minute recess, the Galactic Council reached its decision. Humanity, High Councilor Vrelnak announced, will not be charged with genocide at this time. The "at this time" hung in the air like a warning. However, Vrelnak continued, the Council finds humanity's casual approach to the termination of other lifeforms deeply concerning. Therefore, we are imposing the following conditions on Earth's continued membership in the Galactic Union. Jack braced himself. First, all human pest control methods must be modified to prioritize relocation, rather than termination when feasible. Second, for species deemed absolutely necessary to control for health reasons, humane methods must be developed within 5 standard years. Third, humans must file formal ecological impact statements with the Council before implementing any new pest control measures. Vrelnak paused dramatically. And finally, given Dr. Morris's revelations about gut microbiome, that each human will be required to file adoption papers for the approximately 1,000 species they carry within their digestive systems, acknowledging formal responsibility for their care and well-being. Jack choked. You want us to adopt our gut bacteria? Is this a problem, Ambassador? Vrelnak asked innocently. No, no problem, Jack said quickly, already imagining the bureaucratic nightmare of processing adoption papers for 8 billion humans and their trillion gut microbes. We accept these terms. After the session concluded, Jack, Talia, and Dr. Morris found themselves joined by Quixel as they walked back to the human embassy section. I must apologize, Ambassador, Quixel said, their luminescence pulsing in patterns of embarrassment. I judged your species harshly without understanding the unique challenges of your world. No offense taken, Jack assured them. Cultural misunderstandings are inevitable in interspecies diplomacy. Still, I would like to learn more about Earth's ecosystem. Perhaps I could visit your world someday? Jack smiled. We'd be honored to host you. Though I should warn you, we haven't figured out how to relocate dust mites yet, so our cleaning methods might still be a bit shocking. QXL's surface rippled in what Jack had learned was their version of laughter. 3 weeks later, back in his apartment on Earth, Jack Murphy stared at the cockroach on his kitchen counter. Under the new council regulations, he wasn't allowed to kill it. Sighing, he grabbed a cup and a piece of paper. Come on, buddy, he muttered as he carefully trapped the insect. Let's find you a new home. I hear the neighbor's place is nice this time of year. As he walked down the hall to release the cockroach in the building's garden, he couldn't help but chuckle at the absurdity of it all. Somewhere across the galaxy, an entire civilization was congratulating itself on teaching humans to respect all life forms, while simultaneously maintaining perfectly engineered worlds where nothing unexpected or inconvenient was allowed to exist. The cockroach scurried away into the bushes. Jack made a mental note to file the required non-lethal pest relocation form with the local Galactic Union office. Humanity had always been adaptable. They'd figure out how to navigate these new regulations, just as they'd learned to navigate the complex ecosystem of Earth itself. And in the meantime, he still had 999,999,999,999 adoption papers to fill out for his gut bacteria. The paperwork alone might finally accomplish what countless pathogens had failed to do, bring humanity to its knees.